Hi, it's Jeff Chalmers here from discoverdouble-bass.com. That's the home of online lessons and courses to learn how to play the double bass. And today I'm joined by one of our tutors who's also a member of the Philadelphia Orchestra and a wonderful bass player, Joe Conyers. Welcome, Joe. It's great to have you here.
Thanks. I'm happy to be here.
Well, a lot of people have been checking out your playing and they're big fans of what you're doing. And I've been getting a lot of questions from the audience to post to you, and many of them are about equipment and double basses, strings, what bows, this kind of thing. And I thought maybe we could wrap it all up into a quick discussion and you could share some of your thoughts. So first of all, Joe, what instruments are you playing back home? What on your Instagram videos, are they all the same bass?
Generally, they're all the same bass. Sometimes there are guest appearances when I'm traveling. There are a few guest appearances on my page, but generally the excerpts are played on Norma.
And Norma, what's Norma's background?
This is her homeland.
Yeah.
We are
in England.
That's her in England, and she was born about 4 hours south of here in London.
Yeah.
In 1802, and her father is Italian maker Vincenzo Panormo.
It's an incredible thing. It must be a real joy to play. And is it quite a large instrument? I always get the impression that it's got a big sound. A lot of the Panormo instruments seem quite large. Is that the case?
It is large, but what I'm very lucky, it's got these sloping shoulders, so it's actually easy to get around. So I've played many concertos on Norma, which a lot of people think it's crazy. I think Hal thinks it's a little crazy because the string length is not very small. But I do get around. What makes Norma? She's fat between the
lower bouts.
Yes. There's in every way, like both in width and in thickness.
And the rib depth is quite.
Yes, rib depth is it's a little more so than normal. So there's a lot of resonance and room for the resonating chamber. And
what is it about the instrument that when you played it that made you think,
it was the sound. Such a warm, rich, like, come over here, Joseph. Sound. It was just, she was my siren, and I went right to her. Originally she was way out of my league because these things don't come as gifts or fall out of the sky. But with my first job, and this is something that even in thinking about in which orchestra I auditioned for and what possibilities there may be, the orchestra made it available to me, the funds, to actually purchase the instrument. So what I thought was completely unattainable, they made affordable, and that's how I was able to purchase the instrument.
That is a wonderful story. That's fantastic. And so you mentioned string length. The Norma is 42-ish?
Right, so she was her original neck, 44-inch string length. 44.
Yeah.
And then I bought it it had a false nut to 42 and a half. I had another neck made to modernize the instrument and modernize the neck projection. Yeah. So it was a little easier to play, particularly in the higher register. And now she's a standard 42, a big 42.
Yeah.
But a standard 42.
So the bass that you're holding at the minute, just to avoid any confusion, is my instrument. It's a German factory instrument that's about 100 years old or so, and the length, the scale length is, the string length is 41.5 inches on this bass. And when you're traveling around the world or to see different students or what have you, and you're playing different instruments, do you find it takes a bit of time to adapt, or are you fairly comfortable on different string lengths?
It does take some time to adapt, particularly with basses. Our instruments are so different. Our necks are, the way the necks are all different. Like even on your bass, it's much lower. I actually thought it was an E-flat neck. It feels like an E-flat neck compared to Norma. Yeah. And which makes the G way closer. So getting used to that and adjusting, it will not happen overnight, and honestly, to be honest, if I have to play a concerto, this happened recently. I played on this bass all week, and then under pressure, I felt like my hands and body were going back to what I knew, because that's just what happened. So it does take time to adjust to these things, and you won't have time with the instrument, particularly if you have to play something important. You won't have time to adjust to the instrument, so you can do your best.
How about strings? What do you go for?
So for a long time, I did not play spiral chords at all. As a matter of fact, spiral chords scared me, to be honest, because I was afraid, particularly for the reasons jazz players like spiral chords, were the reason I was afraid of them. But there was this wave of spiral chords coming on a lot of the older instruments at Curtis, and at one point I was like, you know what? I'm a pretty obsessive compulsive person, so I'm used to doing things over and over again. But every once in a while, I'm like, okay, let's just change things up.
Yeah.
So one day I put the spiral core Vikes, the light. I love the way the string felt under the finger. I love the fact that it's so thin. Because I love they take a lot of power, but they're thin. So they just feel good, particularly when I'm playing solos versus a thicker string, which starts to feel really fat and gets in the way when I'm trying to be nimble on the instrument. I thought they produced a good tone. Their strings were super responsive, and yeah, particularly with the sounding chamber of Norma, the spiral chords worked really, really well. So I've been playing them for maybe the last 5 or 6 years. Before that, I was a flex core original, ride or die, except for the C, which back then I used a bel canto C. So it was bel canto C and 3 flex originals, A, D, and G. But now I do spiral chords all the way across. Vikes, not the medium gauge. There's a big difference for me.
Yeah.
Because once you start, it's less fun of an experience once we leave the Vikes, for me.
And what about you? You sit next to Hal Robinson in the
Yes.
orchestra, and what strings does he use, just out of interest?
He went through the spiral core phase too, and I believe most of his basses still have spiros.
Yeah.
I believe there's still spiros. When I joined, I think he had bel cantos on the Delalia, which is the orchestra bass. The bel cantos, I think they're a beautiful sounding string. I think to me they're one of the best sounding strings in general, as a generality. For me, I couldn't beat them. This is a long time ago, so they may have come a long way. I should try the bel cantos today, but back then I couldn't really beat them, and it was funny because Hal, who's a very beefy, meaty player, was breaking strings left and right. I think he broke at least 3 in the early years. He'd play, and then the string would in the middle of a concert, and he had to leave. And he always has an extra just in case. So, but I think he's been playing spiros, and there's spiros on his basses right now, I believe. Yes.
Cool. That's really interesting to hear. I love hearing about orchestral players using spiral chords. It's one of those sort of myths that that you can't bow with spiral chords that you sometimes hear. From I think essentially because there's so much, the information is so detailed, and there's a brightness to the string that can be, if you're perhaps they're harder to control than a string like a bel canto. But yeah, they sound wonderful, and we'll cut to a clip that you'll be able to see Joseph perform at the end of this short discussion. I've just got one last thing that I need to ask him about his bow.
Yeah.
So obviously you play French bow.
This is a French bow.
Yeah. Do you have any recommended bow makers? Any people you'd like to give a shout out to?
Oh wow. So I'll just go through the equipment that I have. The maker of this bow is no longer with us. I don't know have that confirmed, but this bow is from the 20s, so my guess is he's no longer with us.
I think you can assume that.
It's a Husson. It's the first bow I ever got to match Norma.
Oh, nice.
It's a beautiful stick, super powerful, pulls a really rich sound out of Norma. So I'm very, very happy with this stick. The stick that I won almost all my jobs with, and is still one of my go-tos, is Grumberger. The Grumberger sticks were really, really, it's a really fantastic stick, super strong. The sound wasn't quite as warm on my bass as this bow was on Norma, but a really, really fantastic Grumberger I really loved. And then I just had a bow made by a modern maker, and I'm gonna try to get his name right. His name is Vladimir Radoslav something like that.
We'll provide a link below.
You can go to Guarneri House. Guarneri House sells his sticks. They've sold a lot of them. He is kind of newer to the scene, and some of the sticks he's made have been quite impressive. As a modern, and the bow that I own by him is, I think, one of his very first French bows, or bass bows even, he's ever made. One of the but one of the very first. And I was very, very impressed, and now it's part of my collection.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah. Well, I think what we'll do is we'll wrap things up, Joe, and we'll cut to a video of you playing one of the excerpts that we've covered this week while we've been filming this course. We've done some great videos here where Joe's been teaching essentially the mechanics that you need and the musical vision that you need to get around the orchestral excerpts and win that audition. So thanks so much for joining me, Joe.
My pleasure.
And we're going to hear you play right now. So thanks for watching at home.